Ladies and gentlemen, this is Scary Bad Reviews, and this is my intro.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Alright, so it is October 2nd. It is the second day of my 31 movies for Halloween, our journey through October, year 4 in the classics coverage. We are continuing Vampire Week, focusing on movies that show an evolution of the storytelling using the monster vampire. Yesterday we covered the original Dracula from 1931, a groundbreaking Universal movie that really lays some of the landscape for horror in Hollywood and really sets up a lot of the lore that we know about vampires within Hollywood. Today I took the time to rewatch a movie that I really do enjoy talking about because I don't think it gets enough credit, and I think with every rewatch I kind of fall in love with it a little bit more. And that's Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is the 1992 edition of the story. Stars Gary Oldman as Dracula, Keanu Reeves as Jonathan Harker, Winona Ryder as Mina, Anthony Hopkins as Dr. Van Helsing. This movie really just... I find difficulty in describing it because a lot of it seems really out of place, and they seem to try their hardest to make it look like it was made back in the olden days of Hollywood. It feels like a movie in full color that they made back in the 40s. It's this really weird dynamic that kind of makes the entire movie feel like a fever dream, which really plays into the story. I mean, the story of Dracula is not an easy one to follow. It also is kind of outlandish and kind of fever dream-ish. So it does a good job at conveying what I think, people within the story of Dracula felt in the situation. It's the same old telling of Dracula with a lot more information, though, than the 1931 edition of the movie. This one really dives into some of the other aspects in the book that the original movie did not cover. We get to see a lot of different story pieces for Dracula, such as his origins as Vlad Dracula back in the 1400s. We get to see the inclusion of some of the elements of Old England in the 1800s, including, how Mina and Lucy live back in England while Jonathan Harker's trapped in Transylvania. We definitely get to see some parts of this, and we get to hear a little bit more of lore and a couple other things with it that we didn't in the original. This movie is really, really good, and it's surprising to me because I think the first time I watched it a long time ago, I really was confused and didn't think it was that great. But each time I watch it, it continues to grow on me a little bit more, and this time I found myself so immersed in it. I gave the movie a 9 out of 10. I think it does a lot of things incredibly well. The visuals are breathtaking. Even in this attempt to try to make them look old school and in the 40s, it's still just, your eyes are locked on to what's happening at all times. Vivid colors, bright schemes, beautiful set pieces, good special effects, really eerie cinematography in some aspects. The cinematography that they do around the character of Renfield is actually awesome. I'll touch on that a little bit more in a bit. A lot of the wardrobe is awesome. Dracula's armor at the beginning is badass. The stuff that they have them in later really helps to distinguish characters from each other. The story is well written. I don't think there's very many points where an audience would be genuinely confused unless they were intentionally meant to be confused at a time where not all of the details are out there. It's got a little bit of length to it. I don't know how many people would sit all the way through the 2 hours, but sitting through the 2 hours is definitely worth it to me. I think that's one of the only knocks that I can really give the movie, is that it might feel a tad long for some people. But, I mean, there's so many things in this movie that they do well and kind of breathe a fresh breath of air into the Dracula story. The performances in it are great top to bottom. Gary Oldman has this incredible ability to both portray this hideous, demonic creature that understands its power is close to that of a god, and just this beast that resides over Castle Dracula in Transylvania. But then on the flip side, he has this ability to show himself as this smooth and enigmatic and charismatic gentleman in most of the scenes in England. His accents on both of them are really well done. The wardrobe that they chose for him in either situation, the prosthetics on him as the old, decrepit Dracula are great. The wardrobe and suits and stuff that they have him in as the young Dracula are awesome. He carries this mystery about him throughout the whole movie. His mannerisms in both situations really help to portray the character in the light that it should be. Keanu Reeves' portrayal of Jonathan Harker in this one is a lot better than the Jonathan Harker in the original, in that you really do feel him getting really close to the brink of insanity, almost losing his mind, almost losing his life, really kind of seeing the toll that these events have taken on him. He really does display some of the emotional distress and also just the mental breakdown that Jonathan Harker endures by being held captive in Castle Dracula for as long as he was. You do kind of see elements of an innocent man who gets caught up in these evil and demonic things that, one doesn't expect themselves to get caught up in, really giving in to some vices, and that's how Dracula begins to take advantage of him. Winona Ryder's portrayal of Nina is awesome. She is able to portray herself as completely innocent. This pure character, even at the end when she understands what her fate will be and what she has to sacrifice to be able to defeat Dracula, she does a great job throughout all of it. I definitely prefer her performance over the original Mina's in the 1931 version. Anthony Hopkins' portrayal of Dr. Van Helsing is another added bonus to the movie. Just his ability to play someone who seems so insane and yet you love their character, you love kind of the energy that they bring to the movie. He brings about this air of like, I've seen some of the most vile shit in the world and yet I still think positively, I still have a great attitude about all of it. Some of the low-key kind of cool performances in it are the three guys that were trying to woo Lucy before she becomes a vampire. They did a great job. The Texan, the Doctor, and of course the Lord. The guy who plays Renfield in this, I'm going to have to look up the name. Yet again, another performance of Renfield that really steals the show. I mean, if in the original that performance of Renfield was good, this one is excellent. I mean, just pure insanity. They really go over the top to show the setting of the asylum, really some torture almost happening in the asylum, and just seeing him kind of devolve into this being that's already been taken over. It is Tom Waits. Yeah, Tom Waits that plays Renfield, and he does an incredible job at just portraying absolute insanity and devotion to this creature that has taken him over. The prosthetics in the movie are great. Like I said, Gary Oldman's beast of a Dracula that lives in Castle Dracula looks it looks horrifying, it looks grotesque, it looks old and decrepit. His Wolfman style creature that he becomes throughout the movie looks awesome. It's very similar to American Werewolf in London and that kind of prosthetics effects that it looks good on screen. The full bat beast style of Dracula that we see near the end of the movie does look nasty and menacing and just grimy and very close to bat-like. It looks very close, and probably this is where Underworld pulled their design for the Elders. Their design as pure vampires is very close to what this was. I definitely think that if you are a horror fan and you have not seen this movie, you need to take the 2 hours to sit down and watch it. There's a lot of times, especially on the first watch through, there's a lot of times that it'll be like, man, that just seems like poorly made. But I think in a couple instances where it seems either poorly made or corny or something, I feel like it is almost on purpose to bring in those elements of old-timey Hollywood because the story is so old. But it's definitely worth the time to sit and watch it. It is definitely a visual masterpiece. There's never a dull moment on the screen. The chemistry on screen is great between everybody. The story keeps you involved at all times, not always being elements of the horror aspect of Dracula. There's a little bit of this London era kind of society plot in it as well that plays into Dracula's aspect in the story. Like I said, overall it is a 9 out of 10. I've thoroughly enjoyed watching this movie again. I'm really starting to fall in love with it. Every time I watch it, I just keep adding more points on because it just keeps getting better and better, and I find more things that I really enjoy about it. So if you are a true horror fan, I really cannot recommend enough to sit down and take the 2 hours and watch this movie, especially for a good Halloween watch.
Hey, you're finally awake.
That is it for day 2 of our 31 movies of Halloween. Tomorrow we will be continuing the trend of vampires, going in a slightly different direction than we have gone in the past 2 days. We've covered this classic story of Dracula, and now it's time to start pushing vampires maybe into a more modern setting. Tomorrow we will be going with Fright Night, just to kind of see where vampires start to take off in modern settings and really putting them in today's society. As always, if you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. If you have recommendations for each of my weeks, please let me know. I'm always open to switch around my plans, and thank you for listening.